Hi everyone. This video covers the highlights of Chapter 5 from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, which is one of the most famous essays in the history of political philosophy. And this chapter is called Original Acquisition, or it's about property rights. So let's go ahead and jump in. Here we have in the very first lines of the chapter, he mentions what he's been talking about already in the essay, which has to do with the rights that human beings have pre-politically, that is, in the state of nature. And so he's probably responding to Thomas Hobbes and others who are concerned to discuss human rights in a pre-political state. He says, men, being once born, have a right to their preservation and consequently to meat and drink and such other things as nature affords for their subsistence. But as he says in the next section, it's not so clear where human beings acquire their property rights. And so that's what he wants to do in this chapter, is establish where we get rights to property. And so scrolling down a bit, he says, though the earth and all inferior creatures be common to all men, yet every man has property in his own person. This nobody has any right to but himself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we may say, are properly his. Whatsoever then he removes out of the state that nature hath provided and left it in, he hath mixed his labor with, and joined to it something that is his own, and thereby makes it his property. So just review that, think this over. What he's saying is that we own our body, we own our labor, and if you mix that labor with the stuff of the earth that we have in common with everybody else, you make that stuff your own. He continues, no man but he can have a right to what that is once joined to, at least where there is enough, and as good left in common for others. So whatever you can mix your labor with, and we're going to talk about some examples in just a second, then that stuff is yours. He does indicate there are limits to this, however, and this is the first indication here at the end of this paragraph. At least, he says, where there is enough and as good left in common for others. So as long as everybody else has their opportunities as well, as long as they have a chance to acquire property, then whatever you do, whatever you mix your labor with, that's yours. Next section, section 28, he says, he that is nourished by the acorns he picked up under an oak, or the apples he gathered from the trees in the wood, has certainly appropriated them to himself. So acorns, apples, this is basically hunter-gathering, right, culture. These people are picking things up and making it their own. So that's one example. Another example, he says, though the water running in the fountain be everyone's, yet who can doubt, but in the pitcher is his only who drew it out. His labor hath taken it out of the hands of nature where it was common and belonged equally to all her children, and hath thereby appropriated to himself. So you can imagine there's this natural spring, and people who go down there with their pitchers and collect the water. The water in the spring was common to everyone. Nobody owned it, but as soon as you dipped your pitcher in and took that water out, that water in the pitcher is now yours. So you have now a property right over that water. Another example, he talks about deer and venison. He talks about fish and ambergris. By the way, I had to look that up. I wasn't sure what that was, but it's parts of a whale. And the hare as well. All of these things hunter-gatherer societies would be concerned with. This is how they acquire property, by gathering, by hunting, making this stuff theirs. He says, it will perhaps be objected to this that if gathering the acorns or other fruits of the earth makes a right to them, then any one may engross as much as he will, to which I answer, not so. So again, here he's going to expand more on this. What are the limits of this gathering or making your own property of stuff? You can gather as much as you want until it spoils. So if you can use what you gather, then it's yours. But if you gather so much that it starts to go to waste, then you've gathered too much. And so that would be the limitations on acquiring property, or one limitation. Going down now to 32, he brings up another topic. He says, as much land as a man tills, plants, improves, cultivates, and can use the product of, so much is his property. He by his labor does, as it were, enclose it from the common. So now he's talking about land. He's not just talking about gathering meat or food. So what about the land? He thinks that you're supposed to till it, you're supposed to improve it, and you're supposed to, here in bold, enclose it from the common. And interestingly, he thinks that this is why the Native Americans didn't have a right to the land, because they didn't enclose it from the common. I'll leave that to you to think over. But he thinks that in order for you to acquire land or own land, you have to enclose it, whatever that means. Basically improve the land itself. Okay, scrolling down a bit. He says in section 40, for it is labor indeed that puts the difference of value on everything. And let anyone consider what the difference is between an acre of land planted with tobacco or sugar, sown with wheat or barley, and an acre of the same land lying in common without any husbandry upon it, and he will find that the improvement of labor makes the far greater part of the value. So again, we're talking specifically about land, but what makes something valuable? It's human labor. It's actually working with the natural stuff and improving it. He thinks that's what gives it its value. He continues, when any one hath computed, he will then see how much labor makes the far greatest part of the value of things we enjoy in this world. And the ground which produces the materials is scarce to be reckoned in as any, or at most, but a very small part of it, so little that even among us land that is left wholly to nature, that hath no improvement of pasturage, tillage, or planting, is called, and indeed it is, waste. I want to underline that word there. And we shall find the benefit of it amount to little more than nothing. So that tells you a lot about his view about work, labor, the value of land, the value of nature. I want to wrap it up here with section 43. He says, it is labor then which puts the greatest part of value upon land, without which it would scarcely be worth anything. So I don't know about you, but this raises some flags in my mind. Even though certainly he may have a point about property rights, he doesn't seem to really value natural land apart from human labor. He doesn't seem to have any way to account for, at least not in this section, what value the natural world has, and I wonder what implications this has on the conservation of nature, on pollution, and just natural destruction. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do have a very interesting and very positive account on what it means to own stuff, to make stuff our own. So maybe he does make a good case for the establishment of property rights, but I'll leave that to you to decide. I hope that was helpful.